I think we all know that one person in our lives. That one insufferable person who loves Christmas just a bit much. That person in this story is Mick Foley, whose love of Christmas is well documented. This video isn't going to be a deep dive on Mick Foley and Christmas, because I'm pretty sure it'd take me till Easter to research that alone. In this video, I wanted to talk about a specific match that took place on the December 20th, 1999 episode of Raw, why it happened, and what happened next. It's a not often talked about part of the long and violent history between all three of Mick's wrestling personas and one of his most fierce rivals, Triple H. I also wanted to briefly go over the whole feud, because in my opinion, it's one of the more overlooked long-term WWE rivalries. Prior to late 99, Foley and Triple H had feuded through the summer of 1997. That time, their dispute stemmed from the King of the Ring finals that year, where Triple H would finally get his win that he was meant to get the year prior. The still blue-blooded Hunter Hearst Helmsley would take the crown with help from China, and their grudge would lead to a steel cage match at SummerSlam 97. This match took place in Madison Square Garden, where Mick famously as a teenager hitchhiked to see Jimmy Snuka jump off the cage onto Don Morocco, and so Mankind paid tribute to this by dropping an almighty elbow onto Helmsley. Mankind would win that night in the Garden, but their story would be far from over. The feud would perhaps peak with a very famous Monday Night Raw moment, which also took place in Madison Square Garden. On September 22nd, 97, one of Mick's other personas, Dude Love, was supposed to face Triple H, but Dude instead appeared on the Titantron. He explained that hardcore matches aren't really his thing, and so would introduce Mankind. Mick Foley would actually interview himself using a clever editing trick like this, but neither one would want to wrestle Helmsley. They would finally introduce to WWE audiences Cactus Jack, and Triple H would react like he'd just been told he was being sent back to development. Cactus and Triple H would have a belter of a hardcore match, ending with a vicious looking piledriver on the stage. I wonder if that's where Triple H's aversion to them comes from nowadays. Foley and the game would meet more over the coming years, such as in August 99, where Mankind would win the WWE title in a triple threat match with he and Steve Austin at SummerSlam. On the next night, Triple H would threaten to break the arm of Jim Ross unless he was given a title shot against Mankind, which he would win later that night to earn his first world title. It would be at the end of the year though that their feud would really get heated again, starting with Santa Claus, kind of. On an early 2024 episode of Foley is Pod, talking about his match at the 2000 Royal Rumble with Triple H, Mick Foley detailed that around this time his active career was coming to an end, but he didn't yet know when or how. He notes that he had a meeting with Vince McMahon in early November, where he described how his body was wearing down, and that he couldn't even play sports with his kids anymore. McMahon wanted him to retire right away. There is a world where realistically, Mick Foley's last match could have been Mankind and Al Snow vs Hardcore and Crash Holly from the November 4th, 99 SmackDown. Not exactly Sting's retirement at Revolution, is it? Better than Flair's though. Not that one. Aye, that one. By this time, we were in the McMahon-Helmsley era, which took over WWE in late 99 into the year 2000. On screen, Triple H and Stephanie McMahon-Helmsley were in charge, and they took great glee in punishing anyone who defied them, especially Mankind. Earlier in the night, Mankind had come out to save Jim Ross, who Triple H was again threatening in the ring, much like he did in August. Mankind tells Triple H and Stephanie that the McMahon-Helmsley era, quote, kinda sucks, then tells Stephanie off for disparaging the good name of Santa Claus by wearing a Santa hat. Instead of fighting Mankind himself, Triple H books him in a boiler room match, but doesn't tell him who his opponent will be. Mick would find out who his opponent was moments before heading into the boiler room for the match. To this point, this would only be the fourth boiler room brawl match, and Mankind had a winning record in them. In the first one, he defeated The Undertaker at SummerSlam 1996. In that match, the two fought out of the boiler room and took part in the slowest chase scene in history on their way to the ring. To win, they had to enter the ring and take the symbolic urn from Paul Bearer. but when Undertaker dramatically posed for Bearer to hand the urn over, he turned around, literally turning his back on him. Paul would laugh as Mankind applied the mandible claw, then hit Taker with the urn, cementing his turn to the dark side. No pun intended there, by the way. In the second Boiler Room Brawl, Mankind would defeat The Big Show at the Backlash pay-per-view in April 1999. As you might expect from a hardcore match between these two, Mankind took an absolute beating, coming back with clever use of weapons, like hitting a pipe to make steam shoot out at Show, and in the end burying him under a stack of metal pipes, so he could leave the Boiler Room to win the match. This might be my favourite of the Boiler Room Brawls, because someone actually thought to turn the lights on. Boiler Room match number 3 would take place on the September 23rd, 99 edition of SmackDown. In this one, Mankind would lose to Triple H, who was taking part in 5 matches in one night to try and earn his spot in the WWE Championship 6-pack challenge at Unforgiven, a match that he would win to earn his second world title. Being the 4th of 5 Triple H matches in one 2-hour show, and the second Mankind match, as he would lose the tag team titles with The Rock earlier in the night to the New Age Outlaws. This one is very short at just under 5 minutes. At the end, Mankind wanted to dive off a roof, much like he did in the cage match against Triple H at SummerSlam, but a pipe would knock him off, through 2 tables and debris, allowing Triple H to leave the Boiler Room and win. It was never explained who pushed Mankind. Minutes before the match, Triple H would announce from his locker room that Mankind's opponent for the 4th Boiler Room Brawl would be none other than Santa Claus. Though it's been common knowledge for many years at this point, Mick's fascination with Christmas was first made public in his first autobiography, Have a Nice Day. Back then, the concept of a wrestler writing a book, never mind handwriting it himself, was so novel that it was even factored into WWE storylines. Michael Cole even noted this as he interviewed Mankind right before the match. To make sure that the reluctant Mankind entered the Boiler Room, the Mean Street Posse would attack him and throw him into the room to start the match. That could quite possibly be the first and only time the Mean Street Posse got the upper hand on anyone, and Mankind even quips this once in the Boiler Room. Mankind, still not wanting to fight Santa, attempts to reason with his hero, suggesting that he should just walk out the door and win. His attempts to convince Santa Claus are interrupted when he's attacked by 3 more Santas. It's not clear who these people are, though the wig of one of them keeps falling off. Mankind made quick work of all 3 before being attacked by 2 more Santas. That's 6 now if you're keeping count. Unlike the last 3, these 2 Santas had some pretty distinct mannerisms. At one point, the beard of one slips, revealing Billy Gunn underneath, and the other moves a lot like the Road Dogg. Despite them putting Mankind through a table, the New Age Outclaws are beaten up by Mankind, who picks up a frame with glass in it much like in the Big Show match. He goes to attack one of the Santas, and a 7th and final Santa appears, swinging his sack and smashing the glass into Mankind's face. Not a sentence I thought I'd ever write, let alone say on the internet. The final boss of Santas starts berating Mankind, and from his voice, it's clearly Triple H. He leaves the room, and referee Teddy Long announces Santa to be the winner. The next time we see Triple H is back in his locker room with Stephanie, and he's still wearing part of the Santa costume, just in case you didn't recognize him from his voice earlier. Now this might shock you, but the Wrestling Observer newsletter, nor the Pro Wrestling Torch, covered Mankind's match with Santa Claus in much more detail than recapping what happened on screen. Reading between the lines though, while listening to Foley talk about this time on his podcast, and looking at the story between he and Triple H leading to the Royal Rumble, a lot of the story was told outside the ring. In the Santa match, Foley never actually leaves his feet until getting clobbered by Triple H at the end, and while he has 25 matches between November 99 and the 2000 Royal Rumble, they're all either tag matches with The Rock or short singles matches. On Foley's pod, Mick also noted that Triple H was operating with somebody in me. My self-confidence had been eroded a little bit. I did my part to get into much better shape, but I still needed somebody to push me, and that's what Triple H does. Following their Boiler Room Brawl, the McMahon-Helmsley regime weren't done messing with Mick Foley. On the December 27th episode of Raw, Mankind would be booked in a match with The Rock, a man who he had entered 1999 engaged in a bitter feud with over the WWE title. But since then, a friendship had grown. An odd and sometimes turbulent friendship, but one nonetheless. This wouldn't be an ordinary match though, as the two would be forced to battle in the first and hopefully last pink slip on a pole match, where the winner would retrieve the pink slip and keep their job, while the loser would be fired. Right after Christmas, mind. That's a Vince idea if ever I heard one. While both fought hard to keep their spot, it would be The Rock who would keep his, and Mankind would be fired. In the coming weeks, the McMahon-Helmsley regime would continue to humiliate Mick Foley by hiring Mideon, thankfully with his clothes on, as a fake Mankind to make him look completely pathetic. On the January 6, 2000 episode of SmackDown, this fake Mick Foley would sulk around Universal Studios, Florida, while lamenting his life. In one particularly sad segment, Mideon is sat on the Jaws ride, ranting about how he used to be someone when The Undertaker threw him off the Hell in a Cell, while park visitors around him either look bemused or ignore him completely. If you've ever been on that Jaws ride, as I did as a kid, you, like me, must have been wondering where the hell the tour guide was. At least Jaws did make a cameo, looking more real than he did in the 1975 film. While the fake Mankind was moping around Universal Studios, at SmackDown, which was also in Orlando that night, police were stationed at the arena entrance in case the real Mankind showed up. Little did they plan for Mick Foley's well-documented love of theme parks, as he actually showed up late in the episode at Universal to beat down Mideon. Foley destroys his doppelganger outside the Back to the Future ride, which by the way is sadly no longer there. Can you tell I have fond memories of Universal? Sorry to interrupt with a plug, but I just wanted to let you know that I also have a video on this channel about wrestling at Universal Studios. The December 20th 99 Raw would really heat up Triple H's feud with Mankind, and would eventually lead to one of the greatest SmackDown moments ever, where Mankind would become Cactus Jack again, but also one of the greatest matches in the history of the Royal Rumble, though I'm a bit biased, because it's one of my favourites of all time. This feud would come to an end at No Way Out 2000, where Cactus Jack would lose a title versus career match. Speaking of favourites, the Jim Ross call to close that show has stuck with me for all these years. Goodbye, my friend. Thanks for all the great memories, buddy. Mick Foley would wrestle again a month later, but forget. Admittedly, this video's come a long way from originally being about Christmas. Still, happy Christmas to you, and hope you have a happy new year. Thank you for watching yet another wrestling channel. If you enjoyed this, please comment, like or subscribe.